Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today I want to talk about a supplement to enhance your game. One of the goals of this channel has always been to try to show you um, inspiration for your role-playing games. Things that might not be role-playing game products that might influence you into designing better adventures, creating new worlds, all sorts of that kind of stuff. And I have several videos back in the catalog of things. If you want to go back and check those out, I'll try to put a link to a couple down below of things where I try to show you some things that are inspirational that are outside of sort of just gaming products themselves. Today is no different. I want to show you a cool product called the Kingdom of Dwarfs. This is a product, and yes, dwarfs, not dwarves. This is a product that is put out by IDW and was written by David Wenzel and Rob Walsh. It is not a gaming product. As much as it looks like the same size and sort of layout as a role-playing game product, it is not. And what this is something very unique. It is a history of dwarfs, and they refer to them as dwarfs throughout this book, which is interesting. But it's a history and mythology of dwarfs in human in human history and on Earth itself. So one of the unique things is this book starts off that in the 80s in England, there was some farmer who was digging in his garden, his geranium garden, I believe, and he finds an ancient dagger. And so he calls some of his friends, and they begin to talk to him about maybe doing an excavation into his land, into his flower garden, and he agrees. And the further they go down, they find they find a skeleton with some other unique sort of artifacts with it. A skeleton of what they believe was a human, a full-grown adult human and a child buried together. And the reason they say that is because the bone structure, or the bones are shorter, like that of a child, but the skull itself is the size of a human adult male. What they didn't realize is that until later that they had discovered the burial site of a dwarf. And the further they dig down in, they begin to discover that there's a doorway underneath his flower garden into the subterranean world of the dwarfs. And so what this book becomes is almost like sort of a archaeological, historical sort of document into the history of dwarfs, and human culture, and why where the dwarfs were influential to us and had changed our civilization, as it were, and why they no longer exist and why they're no longer here. One of those aspects is that Christianity found that the ideas that Christianity had found that their culture and that their ability to create amazing things was very heretical, and thus were driven out or given. They created a whole bad reputation of being these horrible troll-like creatures, and thus were sort of written off as being mythological creatures and stuff. At the time that the dwarves began to work with humanity through things like the Roman Empire, the aspect that the dwarves actually were the ones that built Stonehenge, that they were responsible for the sword and the stone, and had walked side by side with King Arthur. This is an amazing book. This is a beautiful book. Beautiful in itself. The creation of it is very, very well done. It's a very sturdy book. It's full color throughout, glossy pages. The artwork is utterly amazing. I'll put some of the images up here in the screen as well too. The artwork just blows me away, and the first time I saw this, I knew I had to have this, because this instantly, every single page of this sort of brought out inspiration in me on how I want to bring this to a table, and what you can use this thing for. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you know I love the idea of visitation fiction, right? The idea that somebody from Earth, modern day or historical, just average, everyday human people, going to these fantastic worlds, things like fantasy worlds, or stories like John Carter and the Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The idea that this human man from Earth during the Civil War he's transferred to Mars and finds a whole new world of science fantasy. The Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the late 80s The idea that these kids get on a roller coaster ride and they end up in the Dungeons and Dragons fantasy world. I love those ideas. I love that type of fiction from the 70s and 80s where people from our world visit worlds where they're not, they don't belong, and thus there's an idea of exploration and discovery that is just phenomenal. And I think that this would do very well for that because of the fact that it's sort of based on human history, right? It's based upon the idea that they had influenced our civilization, as it were. And we as humans, because we're horrible, drove them out and destroyed them eventually. So I think that this game would be, I mean, you could use this for a lot of different things. You could use this for the background of a homebrewed world in D&D if you wanted to. Where I think this game would really shine is if you were using it in a game like maybe GURPS or Dungeon Crawl Classics. What I really want to use it for is Warrior Rogue Mage, which is a game I will review in the future, which is a free role-playing game that is phenomenal. That is just, it encapsulates everything that I've sort of liked about role-playing games. And you'll see. I'll do a review on it soon, but it's free product. I'll put a link to the thing down below if you want to go check it out. Warrior Rogue Mage, and I think it would work very, very well for this. I have an idea of using it of humans in the 1980s doing archaeological research and actually entering in through a portal into the historical aspect of this world, where dwarves were still a prominent race and had influenced human history, as it were. So a cool visitation fiction type of a game using this book. If you have a chance, go check this out. You can find these in probably most comic book stores because it is an IDW product, which IDW is very prominent when it comes to graphic novels and comic books and stuff. So you might be able to find this at your local comic book store. You probably will find this at any good independent bookstore that you can find as well too. You can find it online as well. It retails for $29.99, so $30. Like I said, the quality of this is beautiful. The interior art is all full color, and the artwork is utterly amazing. It's very classic, very, very beautifully done, very evocative of the setting and stuff as well too. And I can't wait to use this to sort of just bring this to life and have my players explore an entirely sort of alternate history of the kingdom of dwarfs. Until next time, I'm Questwise, and I am out.